beached whale on the...
I'm thankful that God provides.
Professionals will be investing right now to help serve churches.
And let's talk about ministry, and let's talk about how we can serve God and do what God has us to do. This deals with the topic of managing shrink. And managing shrink is something that you have to be good at. Most of the time, we want to manage growth. That's a lot of fun, being able to manage growth and think about what's next and share the needs with what's happening next. But this last year, we have had to do the work of managing shrink. And it is just as much work, if not more, than managing growth. And so this has just got 5 things to think about when it comes to managing shrink. Number 1, managing growth adds the next most important thing. Managing shrink eliminates the least important thing. The easiest to cut is rarely also the least important. This one is really important when you're trying to figure out, okay, what are we going to do? You realize that, okay, I'm shrinking, and so I've got to cut something. Now, the easiest one to cut, many times it goes into the dining room, and we're like, oh, let's cut there. That's not the place we want to cut. That's going to hurt the philosophy of the organization. Now, but we're shrinking. What do we do with that? The same way that we try to figure out, okay, what's most important? We've got to apply some of that same thought and some of that same effort to what is least important. Don't be afraid to get your team involved in trying to figure out, okay, what are the things that because we're shrinking, we're going to have to get rid of. By not sharing this information with your staff, they all come to conclusions on their own. They're able to figure out this equation. We're shrinking. That means we have less money, we have less ministry. That means we don't need as many people, or that means we can't do. What are we going to cut? And if you don't figure it out and say, here's what we're going to do, everybody has their own opinion about what should be shrunk. No different than when you're growing and you're like, we just got $1,000. And if you don't say next, and we're planning to spend it on this, they will all be like, we could spend it on this, and we need this, and what about this? And there's going to be so many opportunities that you're going to disappoint. So managing shrink says, okay, what's the least important? 2 different ways to shrink are tightening the belt and structural change. We may at times want to keep doing the same things just more efficiently, but at some point, we just can't keep tightening the belt. For the life of the team, we have to be willing to cut out an entire process or ministry in order to not be spread too thin. This last year for us, we looked at about a 50% drop in camper days. And we had a resident staff team that's 30 people. There's another 21 who are on ministry crews. So there's 51 people. So a 20% drop in revenue that's a lot of people. There's 10 people there that you have to say, okay, what are we going to do? And so tightening the belt, I think, is a good thing to make budget. You know what I mean? To just figure out, okay, here's what we're going to do. But when you have big things that happen where you shrink, in order to get back into that spot, in the same way that you started a ministry, in order to grow, you may have to get rid of something completely in order to simplify that calendar, in order to simplify the processes to get into a spot where you can do what needs to be done. I think this is some of the hardest work that directors have to figure out. Nobody else gets to do this. This is your job as a director to say, okay, we're going to cut this completely. And it's probably somebody's baby and they've worked on it a long time and they've wanted to have it, but I just can't do everything that we've done with this group of people with less. We'll have to cut something out. Figure out objective points at which you will pull the trigger on shrinking your team or your types of ministry. Knowing some of these ahead of time allows people to prepare for the upcoming hard changes. And so in our ministry, we know that we'll grow. When we add 750 camper days, we'll add a resident staff member. But what does that mean? If we shrink 750 camper days, that means we need to get into a number like that. If we don't shrink those 750 camper days, we have to eliminate benefits or we have to eliminate costs in order to get into those spots. And just objectively saying this is where we need to be for us to have staff members, and if we don't have that much ministry, we will have less staff, is an okay thing. I like the objective numbers because it doesn't make it so personal. You know, it's just kind of we get to this, that's a milestone, and we're set to go, and we'll make that decision. If you want more information on how that works in our ministry, love to share it with you. Then the next one, learn contentment with the spot you are in. Apathy is a lack of care for where you are. Discontent is being upset with God with where you are. And our expectations often revolve around growth. But God's plan is bigger than my life, and I have to be okay. Like, I kind of have it in my mind. I'm naturally an optimistic person. To my wife's, she's got a naturally pessimistic side. So between the two of us, maybe realism happens, but depends who's got a better read on this. Optimistic, pessimistic. But I just need to say, okay, I'm content with where God has me. So I know I've had a chart of where we could be, you know, in the future, and we would need this. And this last year has just destroyed that. Like, okay, wad that up. I have no idea if we're going to get to those plans, but I got to be content with exactly where God has put us. This is part of His big plan. I'm a little part of His big plan, and I'm okay with being in His plan. The expectation I had might not happen, but that's okay. Shrink tests what we are trusting in. If we trust the size or stability of our ministry instead of trusting God, we should expect God to remove our idols. And this one's a little scary because, at least for us, we sat down and we had those conversations. So what would we do if we didn't do this? Where would we go? And I don't always know all of those answers, but I need to just trust in God. He took care of me last year. 2020 is no different. 2021 will be no different. God is the one who cares for us. The way that He cares for us may look different from year to year. And so if I get real used to, you know, we just have a lot of summer campers, and that's the way we pay the bills. And if we start trusting in summer campers, God's going to say, no, I need to remind you, I'm the one who gave you summer campers. And so He does that a myriad of different ways. Ignoring shrink hurts people. This is how you make hard decisions, is you know by not making it, you're going to hurt them even more. Why you are shrinking requires honest evaluation. So please don't blame everything on COVID. You know, we're not this shrunk. This didn't happen. No, there's plenty we can blame on COVID, but it may be that our camp shrunk because we didn't do very good camp, and we've got to be really honest with what with why things have happened. Some things can be more effective if they shrink a bit. In other words, growth can hurt success. Think about this last one. Big is not always better. Jesus could have put together whatever team that He wanted to have an impact on the rest of the world. And what did He do? He chose 12. So I don't have to have bigger and better in order for it to be good. And some of the things that happened for us, you know, you're like, wow, this is a lot smaller, but that's cool. There's some things we can do when we're small that we couldn't do when we were big. Guys are going to hand out one more, and this is the fear of shrink or fearing shrink. What happens when you're in the midst of it? Because the growth part, there's lots of opportunity, and we could do this, but I want you to think about what other people are fearing or what's going on in their minds. Here's the first one, and probably one of the bigger ones. I'm going to lose my job, and I'm going to lose my livelihood, my opportunity for ministry. Here's what we need to realize. Not really. As a laborer in God's harvest, you will always be needed. Biblical truth. Willing to do what God wants, you will always be needed. You just may have to change fields. So as a harvester for God, yes, I have this opportunity here, but I've got to be okay that He may be putting me somewhere else. And that's just part of the way God commands His army. Figures out, grows and shrinks and moves things around. So I don't need to worry about losing my opportunity in God's army. There will always be a place for that. Somebody else will lose their job, but I'll have two people's work. Yes, you may be willing, but remember you can't do more than you're able. You still must live within your limits of strength and time. And this is a real fear because they see what's going on here and we're going to have to get rid of that. Now I have to take that. And I was having a hard time just doing what I was assigned already. How am I going to add to it? And it can be one of those things that a person just says, I just can't do it, and gives up, quits, or really stresses about how I'm going to figure this out. This goes back to managing the shrink, making sure that we make things smaller, easier, simpler in our process. So we have a staff retreat that we normally do that's like a 3-day retreat on off years of Tweakage, and it's a fun thing that our ministry bound did. But a couple of weeks ago, we just cut a whole bunch of things. We just said, we've got to make this thing simpler. This was great before, but it has taken so much work to do whatever we do this last year. I need to make something on the calendar easier. So we still have it on the calendar, but Wednesday is just a day off. It's just an extra one. It's just a break day. The other days are catch-up days. We're doing one meeting in 3 days. And some of you are looking at your director, it's a good idea. But one meeting in 3 days, we're playing a couple of activities, we're sleeping in 2 days. It's just, I've got to make it simpler. I got to cut that out. And you can see the staff is like, oh, thank you. Like, okay, that I know we've done that before, and it was fun before, and it was good before, but we're in a spot where we had to be okay with shrinking it. Here's another one. Where's the Achan in the camp? Start looking around. This shouldn't be happening to us. There must be a problem. Maybe it's me. What have I done that have caused this? And then because we're all sinners, it is all us. We can all be like, I am the Achan, and maybe I need to leave. And this is where you just have to say, okay, bad things happen for many different reasons. Don't assume that your coworker is the cause of your hardship. Really makes for really rough team relations if you're looking around and saying, "There's an Achan in the camp," and now what did they do in biblical times? Don't do it. Don't go there. Number 4, it's not going to be normal anymore. Actually, it is normal that God does not let us get too comfortable in any one spot. So anybody in this room with gray hair, or they should have gray hair, I'm not going to point at anybody, they've been around long enough that they just know it's not going to stay the same. You know what I mean? You get used to normal, and it's going to change, and that's okay. People will think that we are incompetent because we're not growing. I should not be worried about what other think and need to concentrate on being a good steward of whatever God has entrusted with me. And this is where I get it easy in my head. I wanna share with pastors, and I want to share with others. Yeah, it's growing and it's all going great, and I'm like, no, it's not, and it's a little tough here. So I don't need to worry about what people think when I'm in these modes of shrink. And then some closing thoughts that are just real Bible truths here. Speak to yourself truth from the Bible. Don't listen to your emotions and speculations about the future. Okay? So you need to talk to yourself more than you listen to yourself. And you need to talk to yourself the biblical truth that is there. God is in control and powerful, Psalm 46. God is my portion, Psalm 73. And God provides, 1 Kings 17. These are the things that when I get in this mode of fear, and I'm in that, and then that fear just kind of grips me so that I do nothing and I don't feel able to do a single thing. I just have to rest in the truth that God gives us, continue to be his laborer, and work through these areas of shrink. I believe that there are huge silver linings, positives, good things that come from something like this event, like COVID. And it's an okay thing for us to work through it and say, okay, I didn't like it and it wasn't all easy, but I can point at some things that are really good, and they're a helpful thing. Anybody want to add a point or two? I'll give you like a minute or two to add anything. Anybody want to comment on either one of these 2 cards right here? Something that would help in managing shrink or dealing with the fear of shrink.
God doesn't have to have the camp.
Yeah.
That we're simply here to serve the church, and the church is the one thing that's going to continue.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And God has raised up and closed parachurch ministries, and so to not view ourselves as necessary.
Yeah.
That it's a privilege to serve, but God doesn't have to have the camp.
Yeah, my wife and I had this discussion where we realized, and we just started sharing with each other, reminding each other, we're not critical path. Like we're helping critical path, and if this didn't happen, I would join critical path in doing what they're doing, and I think we're a great help. But God may do it different ways as it happens. good. Yep.
The importance of reminding staff that even though this may be coming to a shrinkage, everything we've done in the past is not in vain.
Yes. That's
You
good.
can't take that away.
Yeah, you can't take past ministry away. That's really good. That's a good one. Yep.
Even if you have to shrink, even if you have to get smaller, as long as you're still presenting the gospel, children are still hearing the gospel, people are still having the ability to hear the gospel and be saved, it's still worth it.
Yeah.
Especially with the suicide rate going through the roof right now. We had one that got saved and then later committed suicide, but it was worth it because he got saved before he died.
Mm-hmm. Good. You know, this year was so odd. You have a tendency to, you know, normally we see a little over 100 salvations, and I think, Craig, what do we have, 16? Something like that, like 16. And it feels like a fail. You know what I mean? Because you're like, well, normally it's been, but they weren't bringing their friend or their neighbor. They were just happy to bring who they had. And then some of you may be in a spot where you're like, okay, we didn't even have summer camp. I don't have a salvation decision to share with anybody. But that's not the failure. When you look in times where God puts people in different spots, you see where he really blesses, but you also see where he's preparing and does different things. It's really good. Anybody else? Yep.
We had a serious shrinkage in 2017 when the Lord chose to take our lodge by fire.
Yes.
We were down to nothing, essentially, except
Yeah.
the buildings he chose not to take. But many of you know Dick McGill, our founder, one of our founders, and he said, you know what? The people who were saved in that building are still saved. It's all good.
I love it when that, when they put shrink in perspective. It's like you've got to put an eternal perspective on this kind of temporal, earthly shrink that we're dealing with. We're a chart in the year, and I know 2020 and all of our charts is going to have this little note by it that reminds us why. And maybe there's a couple years like that, but it's temporal. It's not eternal. It's cool. Anybody else? Last call.
Sam, I think the physical shrink, little as much when God is in it. And so the physical shrink should cause us to grow spiritually and contentment in our walk with God. And it opens up a lot of other opportunities if you take it well.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, if you don't take it well, it's now the baseball bat that's trying to get you to realize God's in control. When you do it well and handle it well, it's so much more. It's like a good thing, even though it's not. It's a crazy how God puts that together.
Communicate as a leader, communicating information with your staff with wisdom. There's a lot of ups and downs with finances or what's happening, what's not happening. And just really having wisdom of what you bring the whole team into, but actually sharing actual, true information with your team so that they can help bear the burden along with you. And as you share the hard, you always have to share the hope of God in that communication of truth.
If you came down, well, you all came down our road. You saw 116 days without camp, and we've not been in that situation since like 1979 or something like that, where we'd gone that long without camp. And it's in shrink. It's easy to speculate on the future. So if on day 114 we brought everybody together and we're like, if things keep going like this, the camp is just kaputski. We're done. Everybody's let go, and I think we have enough money till July 4, and we're done. We have to really be careful and shrink that we don't speculate that what is shrinking now will be the new normal forever. That it just keeps on going downhill. God can turn things around. God can change things, and I have to really be careful in the same way that when growth is happening, that I can't just keep that line going up and say, yeah, look where we're going to be. Some of the small camps that are here, I love the fact that you can double your camper days in 1 year. It's like you're the fastest growing camp in the United States, and that's amazing. And if they're like, okay, we could double every year, very quickly they would be in a line that's not even possible. Same thing happens in shrink. You know what I mean? If you take this line and go the other direction, okay, we're done. done in 19 or in 8 months, and you got to be careful not to take that and assume that it's the same direction. That's speculating about the future, which none of us know, and we realize that we have no idea what the future is. So last Tweakage, there was no session on COVID. What were we thinking? We were only, a few days, a few weeks away. Why didn't anybody see this? Nobody shared that this was going to happen. We did Tweakage in great, like it's going to be an amazing summer. That wasn't. And so that's us sitting here saying, okay, I don't know the future. God is in control. I will trust him.